Ignited, The Fall of the Rising Hero. Chapter 7, This Ends Now. It's been almost a year since Quixotic took up Dr. Baleful's offer to intern at her lab. He sat at his desk, overlooking a blood sample under a microscope, the TV blaring above him. "This just in," said the TV reporter. "The hero, Max Dream's newest, youngest sidekick, Ignited, stops the villain Metal Maniac from taking over a train. He tracked down the main villain after he followed a suspicious figure sneaking onto the crowded train at the train station. The older sidekicks, Magnamar and Megalodon, helped passengers safely evacuate the train while the hero, Max Dream, handled the other villains, stopping any more casualties from happening." The camera then pans over to 4 heroes in the train station with the police taking away the villains in the background. "Ignited, you're only 17 years old, making you one of the youngest sidekicks in hero history," exclaimed the excited reporter. "You're also recently one of the first graduates from the Xavier Academy's Arizona branch, and you're already thinking about becoming an independent hero a year or 2 from now? How do you think you'll be able to do that at your young age?" Panicked, a blonde-haired man wearing white and blue spandex swiped the mic before Ignited could open his mouth. "In my experience, young Ignited here has been one of my most courageous, hard-working, determined sidekicks," the man began, already covering up his panic from before. "I, Max Dream, believes young sidekicks like the Igniteds of today are our future heroes of tomorrow. Like I always say, dream for the future and fight for a maximum tomorrow." Yes, but..." The reporter scanned the crowd, finding the young sidekick again. "Ignited," she called over, spotting him. "There is hard competition for the top hero spot in Arizona, let alone America. So how do you plan to stand out as your own hero and go independent?" Ignited turned towards the mic, his brown eyes scanning the reporter like she was asking the dumbest question he had ever heard. "If you want to be a winner, you have to go all in. Or fuck off and take the L, loser." Quixotic recognized the voice instantly. He snapped up from the microscope to the TV, his green eyes wide with recognition. "Phoenix?" He took in his high school bully's appearance, from his coal-black harem pants to the tips of his spiky fire-red hair. His hero costume was accented with gold bangles that hung around his wrist and forehead. He would have had flawless pale skin if not for the hordes of freckles that line his slim, yet muscular chest, arms, and even his face. Despite his one visible flaw, he looked like a fire god standing out in a crowd of mortals. He was well on his way to become a top hero, was on his way to live out Quixotic's dream. The reporter took a second to think about the fiery response before replying. "That's a bit harsh, don't you think?" "There's nothing harsh about it," replied Ignited. "You said it yourself. There is hard competition to become a hero, let alone the top hero. I'm here to tell you, I'll become #1 in America. So if you don't like that, then take the L and fuck off, loser." Ignited smirked to the camera before he was pulled away by a tan sidekick with gills. A woman with fire for hair took the mic and gave an awkward smile. "As a fire type myself, I can say what Ignited means is that we hope for the brightest future in..." Magnamar tried to soften the blow of Ignited's words, but you could clearly hear Megalodon scolding him in the background. "God damn you, Ignited!" yelled Megalodon. "We told you we would only sign you onto our agency if you kept away from the reporters and kept your thoughts to yourself." "But it's true," scoffed Phoenix. "It doesn't matter," yelled Megalodon. "Damn our agency for signing you on. I knew you would be bad for a PG image." But no, the bigwigs thought getting those horny Midwestern MILFs to tune in to drool all over your bad boy abs would be a good thing. "You and your mouth will cost Max Dream his #1 spot in Arizona hero rankings for sure." Quixotic watched the TV, never taking his eyes off of Phoenix, who the camera panned to in the background. He wanted to hate Phoenix, But in all honesty, it was kind of hard to. Phoenix was always so confident in himself, capable in his ability, and determined in his goal. No one could ever keep him down or deter him. In the pit of his gut, Quixotic desperately needed to hate Phoenix for bullying him and being such a stubborn jackass. But at the same time, Phoenix was everything he ever wanted to be. "Hey, you working hard or hardly working?" Quixotic turned towards Dr. Baleful, who was leaning on the doorway. "Sorry, bad joke." She unconsciously shoved her tiny hands into her lab coat. "No, it's just..." Quixotic ran his hands through his shaggy black hair. "I mean..." He took a big gulp. He had to ask her. He needed to know. "These samples you keep asking me to look at, they're unusual. It's like it's a person's DNA, but it keeps morphing, and before it could stabilize, more pressure to change gets put on it. Then it strains and dies." Quixotic waited for her to answer, but Dr. Baleful just stared at the white tile floor, not really looking at it. Quixotic watched her going over something in her own head before speaking up again. "It's not that I don't trust you or that I'm not grateful to you or anything. Just, I've been getting strange samples like this from you for a while. I know you said this was a private project, and you have to limit what you can talk about with it because of potential leaks. But I was wondering, where are you getting these DNA strands from? Can you at least tell me that? Because what's happening to these people's DNA looks horrifying." Dr. Baleful looked up at Quixotic, her dark eyes looking stern. Quixotic started to feel sweat bead down his pale cheek. The look she gave was intense. "You," Dr. Baleful started, "said it looks like there is something wrong with the stabilization when it keeps morphing?" Yes, it's the DNA. It's trying to change, but the strain it undertakes is too much, so it just dies instead." Quixotic rested his chin on his hand. "Whatever is happening to these patients, the added substance becomes too much, especially near the end of the trial. It's going too fast. The body can't keep up with whatever drug this is. Maybe if we fix the dose, then heighten it as we go along, but we would have to be careful or else the body might too quickly adapt and erase what progress we have." Quixotic looked up at Dr. Baleful, who now stood right next to him. He didn't even notice her moving. He was so lost in his own world. "I see." Dr. Baleful's stern look faded away into a smile. "Good work, Quixotic. You have such a good eye. This is why you're my favorite intern." I'm your favorite intern?" Quixotic stammered. "But I mean, it would still be nice to know what exactly..." Dr. Baleful put her soft hand on his cheek. He leaned forward, the soothing feeling of her hand combing through his hair washed over him in calming waves. "You're pretty thin. Any skinnier and you'll be nothing but bones. We should break for lunch soon." Dr. Baleful took her hand away from Quixotic's head. Quixotic's eyes snapped open at the loss of touch, drool hanging out of his mouth. "I'll just finish up and come get you. Consider it a date." A date?" Quixotic blushed. Quixotic had turned towards Dr. Baleful, but she had already left the room. He turned back to his microscope, but he couldn't concentrate on his work. What's going on? Where does she disappear to for a while? These thoughts sat at the back of his head. After a while of impatiently thumping his leg and blankly staring at the microscope, he couldn't stand the not knowing anymore and got up and left his lab. Not shortly after looking for her, Quixotic had spotted Dr. Baleful getting into the elevator. Usually a number would show up on the screen above, telling him which floor she pushed, but nothing appeared, just like last time. He got curious and followed her. He pulled out a piece of paper from his lab coat. Looking at it, he had crossed out most of the floors. The only floors left despite this one were floors on 2B and Tower 9S, which was the second building across from them, and the tiny security stand you go to before getting into the parking lot. Neither of which you would need an elevator for unless you were to get into your car into the underground parking garage and drive 10 feet to... Wait, the underground parking garage, just underneath the building. Quixotic shoved the paper back into his lab coat pocket and began running down the stairs to the parking garage. When he made it down, he quietly hid behind the wall next to the stairwell. But when looking around the parking garage, it looked just like a normal parking garage. Of course, it's just an ordinary parking garage, mumbled Quixotic. I'm so stupid. The sound of the elevator opening jumped Quixotic out of his thoughts. He laid flat with his back to the wall. Looking over his side, he saw Dr. Baleful step off the elevator. She dug into her lab coat until she found an old-looking key. Sticking it into the lock, she pressed against the red door of the janitor's closet until it opened. Wait, the janitor's closet? But Quixotic didn't have much time to think about it. The door was beginning to shut. Quickly, he took the key card that hung around his neck. But when he went to wedge it into the door frame, the door had already shut completely. No, darn it, Quixotic murmured, kicking himself. I was so close. He pouted at the doorknob. Then, without really hoping, he turned the knob, and of course it doesn't open? Quixotic couldn't believe it. The door just opened when he turned the knob. Carefully, he peeked in the crack of the door. When he saw no one, he opened it all the way and carefully stepped inside. The janitor's closet, of course, didn't look like a regular janitor's closet, but it had white walls with white tiled floors, like the rest of the lab upstairs. He continued to walk around cautiously when he noticed that inside the big window rooms, instead of desks and lab equipment, there were hospital beds with people hooked up to IV pumps. Quixotic peeked into one of the windows with a sleeping person in it. He wasn't able to see much of the person under the covers, but could tell by the slight movement that there was a breathing person underneath. Was this lab supposed to be connected to a hospital? If so, he didn't know about it. He wondered what kind of sickness these people could have to put them apart from the main hospital. Also, why is a hospital even in the basement of a lab of all things? Quixotic backed away from the window, continuing down the hall. But where did Dr. Baleful go? He saw no sign of her ever since he came in here. But right as he was about to get worried, in one of the rooms he spotted a laptop on a portable computer desk that they used to wheel around the lab. A laptop that would have to have some answer to what's going on around here inside of it. Quixotic opened the sliding door, walking inside. He got to the laptop before he noticed that it was locked and needed a scan for ID. He took the key card from around his neck, holding it up to the scanner. Of course, the blare of denial. He should have known it wouldn't open for him. His key card wouldn't work on any of the equipment or doors on this floor. Maybe I could ask to borrow someone's ID, claiming to have lost my own. But if anyone asked that person about the recent activity on their ID, it could lead back to me, snooping. And the fact that I had now tried to scan my own card... Quixotic bit his lip. Oh, why didn't he think of that before? It's already too late. If someone checks the card scanner for everyone who has scanned their cards in this port... Damn it, Quixotic, think, or else it won't end too well for me! Quixotic's blood curdled when he felt a big hand touch his shoulder. He could only think of one word. Caught. Cold sweat beaded down his face. The room vividly shook. He was afraid of being caught by Dr. Baleful, but this hand couldn't be Dr. Baleful. It was too big and cold. Maybe Dr. Behemoth knew about this place, and he was working down here. No, wait, calm down. This is a good thing, thought Quixotic. Just tell him you got lost looking for Dr. Baleful. It's not uncanny, you're her assistant, and you bumped into the laptop which scanned your card by accident. That's not weird, right? But before Quixotic could open his mouth, a voice rasped out, I'm sorry, kid. The man sounded dehydrated and old. It wasn't Dr. Behemoth's voice or any of the other scientists in the lab, but it did somehow sound uncanny yet familiar. Quixotic slowly turned around to face the person the voice belonged to. Ah! Quixotic screamed and fell over at the sight of the man, who he saw looked like a plucked chicken wrapped in bumpy pink flesh. I'm sorry for what I did to you at the marketplace. The man reached his hand out towards the boy. Quixotic began scooting away horrified until he got to the other side of the doorway. Please help me, the man rasped. Quixotic heard something rattling on the wall and noticed that chains wrapped around the man's throat and wrist. He then looked over at the samples of blood and skin tissue that were locked up in a clear case in the corner of the room. Please help me, the man repeated. Quixotic stopped shaking long enough to see that the man had cuts and stitches, suggesting he had been nonstop poked and prodded in an inhumane manner. She knew what she was doing when she ran into me at the market. Kid, she knew she was hunting me down. Quixotic felt a hand behind him pull him away and shut the door. Dr. Baleful! He looked up into his master's dark green eyes. Quixotic, there you are. Dr. Baleful reached her hand down to pet his hair, but Quixotic hid it away. He quickly stood up, running through the halls towards the red door he came in from. Listen to me, Quixotic. Dr. Baleful walked towards her scared pupil. I'm not your enemy here. Quixotic's hands clamored for the knob, but when he turned it, it wouldn't open. Dr. Baleful stopped mid-walk. She was shorter than him, than most people, but there she stood towering over him. Quixotic, she sighed. You're experimenting on people, Quixotic cried, pounding on the locked door. Is that what you're going to do to me? Now, why would I do that? Dr. Baleful asked. Look around. You have wonderful deduction skills. What's the one thing you see in common with everyone here? Quixotic looked around the lab. He started to recognize all the faces around him. Some were on the news for petty thievery, to sexual assault, to straight-up murder in lower-income neighborhoods. He also began to recognize the man he bumped into who was chained up. He was unrecognizable at first without his scales, but he was the villain who chased after him at the market when he first met Dr. Baleful. They're all villains, continued Dr. Baleful. I told you I'm not the enemy. But why? Asked Quixotic. I mean, how? Wouldn't the heroes what? Dr. Baleful asked. We're in Arizona, in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nothing and nowhere. There isn't enough glory in catching something in nothing, now is there? And these guys know that. She motioned towards the caged villains. These aren't normal people. These are monsters who hurt normal people and laugh, knowing they could get away with it. The man whose cell you walked into was willing to kill a small woman and a young teen without a second thought. You were there to see it yourself. He was just going to keep going about his business, racking up a body count like this was some kind of game, until he was enough of a nuisance to finally warrant a hero's attention. I didn't bring you on for nothing, Quixotic. I know you'll do the right thing. Quixotic leaned his head on the door, his grip loosening on the knob. Can I show you something? Dr. Baleful asked. They went into a room that looked more like an office room, with nice cushy leather chairs and a big wooden desk with a computer on top. On the wall above her work desk was a machine gun. Dr. Baleful ran her painted green fingernails over the slick black gun. You know, I don't think I've ever told you this, but your junkyard kind of reminds me of my old trailer park. We were poor. My mother left. My dad, drunk. Dr. Baleful looked back to Quixotic, who winced. As you can imagine, I had a hard time, being powerless and all. I was picked on and belittled a lot when I was younger. Dr. Baleful picked up the machine gun off the wall and held it. I don't think I ever told you this story, but I hope you understand why. It's a hard one to go back to. She paused, taking a sharp breath. It happened one day in middle of July. Some boys came into my trailer in the middle of the night when my dad was out drinking. They quickly became furious when they couldn't find anything worthwhile to steal. I ran to my parents' bedroom, the only room besides the bathroom with a door, and shut it. They kept shouting about how they could overtake me because I was powerless, and there was no point. I panicked. I looked around the room until I found one of the machine guns my dad was going to sell at the upcoming gun show. That's when they busted down the door and I shot them. There was no hero to save me. Nothing powerful about me to protect myself. All I had was that machine gun. By the rate some people are evolving, even that won't be enough anymore. That's when I finally understood. This world was off balance. Some were much stronger than others. The system isn't protecting us. We're oppressed. Now you understand. I have to make this world equal again. Not only for my safety, but for everyone like me who can't defend themselves from the powerful and strong. We have to be the heroes by finding a way to get rid of superpowers. Get rid of superpowers? Exclaimed Quixotic. But without superpowers, there would be no superheroes, and superheroes protect citizens. They're supposed to be the champions of the people. Well, what do you think of the chosen heroes of today? Dr. Baleful said. Are they heroic? The TV above her desk played a rerun of Phoenix's interview with the reporter at the train station. He looked up at the image of his bully being displayed as a hero. Quixotic unconsciously rubbed the burn mark on his shoulder. Before looking at the machine gun, Dr. Baleful put back down onto the desk. Shh, it's okay now. I know how it feels. She cooed, running her soft hand through his messy hair. Quixotic let the unfair feeling of letting go of his one big dream of being a hero wash away with the warm affection he got from Dr. Baleful. His green eyes lolled in his head. The last thing they landed on before he lost consciousness was the machine gun that sat on her desk. Phoenix ran up the decaying metal stairs, fury in his heart, the very same machine gun Dr. Baleful had in her office all those years ago in his hand. But when he got to the top, a full-fledged fight had broke out between Tin Can Tim and all the villains. It was chaos. The thugs were throwing everything they had at the huge metal monster. But there he stood, untouched and guarding the building. But he noticed that in the monster's determination to guard the door, he hadn't noticed the metal vent on the side of the building. Phoenix figured the best way to get past everyone is when both sides are distracted. He noticed every once in a while, Tin will send out a wave of sharp metal thorns, in which naturally, the other villains will dodge, or at least try to. Phoenix strapped the machine gun to his back and pulled out 2 machetes. The metal wave of thorns came. Phoenix darted across the landing. He dodged and swerved the thorns as they came. He was midway when a metal thorn headed straight for him. They were coming to split him in half. He didn't have time to move out of its way, so he held out one of the machetes to block. In the split second before the clash, thick vines came up out of the ground right in front of the metal thorns, taking Phoenix's machete up with it. When the metal thorns couldn't cut through all the vines in its way, it retreated back to its place to charge up for the next round. Hey, you know Quixotic, right? Asked the man who summoned the vines. You and that crazy ass went to school here together, right? Who's asking? Retorted Phoenix. Also, I thought you and that crazy ass were working together. What happened around here? Alloy's fucking bitch fucking betrayed us. That's what happened around here. He plans to fill the airways with that gas that can take away superpowers, not just on our enemies anymore, but on all of us. Ooh, what a shocker, Phoenix said sarcastically. The manipulative asshole who betrayed your old gang leader is now... The words took a minute to sink in. Releasing an airborne drug? No way that's... Phoenix's burrow frowned. I mean, he was nowhere near figuring out how... Do you have any idea where he went? Interrupted the vine villain. Phoenix looked up to the glass dome at the very top of the building. Yeah, I know where he went. said Phoenix, shifting his gaze back to the current goal. I just need a way to get myself to that vent. I can help you out with that. Every once in a while, King Lord Boomy will create a bomb with his stored up fats to throw at the Big Ugly monster. While trying to protect the building, Big Ugly will deflect the bomb with his sword arm, which literally blows up in his face. Now, he doesn't seem to take any sort of damage from this, but all the smoke and flash blinds him for a hot minute. When that happens, I'll create a pathway to the side vent with vines, got it? Simple enough, said Phoenix. How do I know I can trust you? If I wanted to, I would have just let you die when the metal thorns were coming after you. Besides, you know so much about Quixotic that you're the only one who could really stop that jackass. I mean, you better, because who would want to have their superpowers taken away, you know? Phoenix grimaced, looking down at his hands. It has been about a decade since he had been a prisoner in Quixotic's and Dr. Baleful's lab, but his beautiful flames were permanently gone. A bomb went off, and in an attempt to save the building, Tin swiped at it. And just like the vine guy predicted, it blew up in Tin's face. Go, now! Yelled the vine user. He grew his wild vines up towards the vent on the side of the building. Oh, and Phoenix? Punch that crazy fuck in the face and break his nose. Phoenix turned without a word, his messy orange hair blowing in the cold night wind, as he ran higher and higher on the vine. He made it just over halfway across when Tin skewered the vine man in the stomach. Shaking, the man slowly reached down towards his missing abdomen. But it's not fair. The man coughed up blood before Tin retracted his blade, and the man's cold body hit the rusted landing. Not soon after, the vines that made his pathway up to the vent had already begun to shrivel up and die. Shit! Yelled Phoenix. He began to pick up speed as the plant wilted behind him. He got to the last stretch of the wilting plant and jumped before it fell. Phoenix plunged his remaining machete into the side of the building, just underneath the vent. He swung his leg up towards the vent to kick it open, but right when he was about to, he felt a sharp pain go through his calf. You should be the one most grateful to Quixotic. Tin kept his metal blade in Phoenix's calf as he spoke. To have once hurt everyone you touched by your destructive nature, only to be blessed, given a second chance at life as a man instead of a monster. Soon we shall all be cleaned of our demons by the purifying rain that'll wash over us all. Will you really be as stubborn as to be consumed by the flames of hatred? Blessed. Pure. Phoenix's bitter laugh escaped his raspy throat. You really think sin can be washed away just like that? If you really are so full of yourself as to believe all that, then... Phoenix tightened his grip on the machete. Then take the L. And fuck off, loser! Phoenix bit his lip as he swung his leg around, tearing his calf off of the metal blade. His blood and skin flew in the air while he kicked the rusted vent, breaking it off the wall with one fell swoop. No! Screamed Tin. Phoenix dived into the vent. Tin reached his bladed arm in after him, and Phoenix slid down, his blood from his calf leaving a trail down the metal grating. Tin's metal thorns extended from his arm, tearing up the inside of the vent as he tore after him. Phoenix continued to slide down, his heart beat a mile a minute. He couldn't do anything but continue to look forward. His foot hit the vent at the other end. The rusted vent broke away instantly. Phoenix came out of the wall on the inside of the school, tumbling onto the white-tiled floor. The blades continued to extend after him. Phoenix sat up, scooting backwards away from the blade until his back pressed up against the white wall. The blade was only an inch away from his temple when it reached its full length and stopped. Phoenix let out a shallow, shaky breath, sweat dripping down his forehead. The blade finally retracted itself, and he let out a long sigh of relief, slumping to the floor, when he heard the outraged scream of the zealot. The big monster punched the outside of the building in defeat. The dim ceiling lights shook, and some of the ceiling crumpled off into specks onto the tiled ground. But Phoenix knew he was safe. Tin wouldn't dare bring the building down and risk hurting his Lord and Savior, Quixotic. Tch, Phoenix scoffed. Lord and Savior Quixotic, the pure. Pfft. Phoenix took a minute to look at his wounded calf. The dark blood was still leaking out. He shut his eyes tight, leaning back against the wall. He knew what he had to do and was dreading it. Taking out his lighter, he heated up his Rambo knife before proceeding to gently press it to his wound. Phoenix gasped in pain as soon as the blade touched skin. He didn't know how good he used to have it as a fire user before. All he used to have to worry about is if his fingernails were blackened, or if his fire left a bald spot when he used it too much without his special hair gel. If you would have asked him 15 years ago, he would have never guessed how much fire or cauterizing a wound would have hurt. Meanwhile, Quixotic opened the door to his school's media classroom. He headed straight for Alloy's machine, which he was glad he set up earlier, because it would have been a pain to do so now. It was also the perfect place to put it. The room, which was set up so high it can reach the radio waves and send out the perfect signal, was now going to be used to spread out a mist that will put an end to superpowered society. Will put an end to the inequality in people's abilities. No longer will the powerful and strong prey on the weak. Quixotic put his old teacher's disembodied hand on the console. He began to implement the code to release the mist. Quixotic moved to the side just in time. The bullet whizzed by his head and hit the machine, cracking the screen, thankfully not breaking it. Quixotic turned around to meet face to face with Phoenix. He saw the recognizable machine gun clutched in his hand. The machine gun that was Dr. Baleful's salvation and her demise. "Ignited!" Quixotic smiled. "Oh, how seeing you makes my heart race. How did you even get past Tin Can Tim?" Phoenix held the machine gun in his hands, panting before he rasped out, "This ends now."